we're going to skip our workshop and jump to the second panel, which is about persecution in the name of religion. And I'm not going to introduce to you the panelists as they were introduced before. We don't have a change in our team of panelists. Crackdowns on religious minorities in various contexts are supported by claims that social stability needs to be preserved in conditions when those minorities undermine integrity. In these conditions, apostasy, which is a serious crime in Islam, dragged even more attention in public discourse. Persecution in the name of religion remains high in the modern world, and there is still no sober consciousness on religious matters in the 21st century. And I think the issue of persecution in the name of religion was quite lively and actual in Malaysia recently. So it would be, I hope it will be a very productive thing to discuss it today. And I give a word to our moderator, Dr. Ahmad Farouk Musa.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you, Julia, Dr. Anas and Dr. Azmi. This afternoon we're going to discuss about persecution in the name of religion, which is very apt topic considering the recent fiascos that we have in our country. And we have seen how, in the name of religion, Shiites, for example, were being put behind bars together with their children. Same to do with Ahmadis, right? And we're not talking about, we're talking about the minorities among the Muslim sects. And if you look even at the Christians themselves, you know, like their Bibles were being raided from the Bible Society. They were being accused of trying to convert this country to become a Christian country, and a lot of other things. And you know, all these issues are somehow rather related to the political survival of the ruling party in itself, because as we know, Shiites are well correlated with the opposition party PAS, and there are some leaders in PAS who are known to be Shiite sympathizers, and we know that in order to get them down is to get at Shiites, right? And I think these are some of the issues that we're going to discuss in this forum, and I'll probably ask Dr. Azmi, would like to start? Yeah, all right.
Good afternoon. Welcome back. Persecution in the name of religion. Now, persecution in the name of religion happens all over the place. Everybody, in one form or the other, every faith in one form or another, I'm quite sure, faces some sort of persecution, either currently or sometime in history. But of course, being the local flavor, I'll be talking about the local situation. Now, Farouk has already very succinctly stated, the type of persecutions that are faced by those who have been declared deviant by the religious authorities and the religious status quo, the Shias, the Ahmadiyas. And that is definitely one aspect of persecution in the name of religion. And in this particular specific example, in the name of Shafi Islam, and it's happening, and we will I'm sure be discussing this in greater detail later on. Inter-religious conflicts or inter-religious persecution happens, and the example of the Christians has been raised, how they're being demonized, how they're going to control all of us, and all those fascinating stuff. Also, they're not just about their property, but their rights, to worship the way they want to worship. But recently, also, there are sounds by those who at one point were of the power elite against Hindus, for example. Yeah, so a former judge of the Court of Appeal said that large Hindu statues were somehow an affront to Islam and shouldn't be allowed. So these things happen, and I think most of us here are Malaysians. We don't need to repeat it because we know it does. Another thing which is perhaps which Farouk did not actually raise is the persecution of Muslims who are not deviant, or at least we're not yet deviant, but who disagree, who simply disagree with the orthodoxy, with the authorities, with the status quo, and we were just. Anas and I were just talking about this. The latest dirty word, before it was apostate, but now the latest dirty word is liberal. You're liberal. As if I'm a pedophile or something like that. Being labeled a liberal is the equivalent of molesting little children. And liberal. To use that term, okay, fine, we'll use that term. People who question the implementation of hudud, for example, that you would be classified as liberal, and of course you're a bad Muslim because a good Muslim would just follow whatever the orthodoxy tell you. And so this kind of stuff it occurs, and the problem is twofold, the way I see it. Firstly is that there's no protection for people who disagree. There should be, because strictly speaking, those who want to shut you down, they are threatening your rights under human rights norms, and also your rights under domestic law. Okay, under the Constitution in particular, but. That's one aspect. The other aspect is that there are laws which exist which actually allow for this persecution to happen. Yeah, and when the thing is, okay, persecution. There are many aspects. As opposed to prosecution. Prosecution is a legal process. Persecution is when you are somehow being victimized, and you can be victimized by anyone. You can be victimized by government. You can be victimized by other private players as well. So it happens in that way. So if you're being victimized by other private players, by other private citizens, then it is the duty of the government to protect you. But it doesn't seem to work that way. All right. As for example, we can see during a few years ago during the Article 11 movement, where mobs would stop forums, etc., and the police, instead of telling the mobs, "Look, can you please go away?" they tell the forum organizers, "Can you please shut down?" So the victims are the ones who are being they're not being protected, but they are instead being persecuted doubly. By the private citizens who are attacking them, and by the government officials, the police, who should be protecting them but are not. So that's one kind of persecution. But the other one is, of course, if it's officially backed. And in this sense, what are the tools of persecution in this country? Well, there are several. One of them is the Printing Presses Publications Act, which actually allows great control over what is published, books in particular. And Zairil had already mentioned about the banning of books. And on what grounds can you ban a book under this law? Well, if it's found to be a book or any sort of publication, it could be a pamphlet, it could be an umbrella with words on it. Is a publication. Yeah, a T-shirt could be, it could be a publication. If it's found, any publication which is found to be prejudicial to public order, morality, security, or which is likely to alarm public opinion. If the public is alarmed, is grounds enough to ban something. Oh my goodness, And of course, Malaysians are extremely sensitive. Don't forget, we are easily alarmed, like little children. So it's very broad. It's extremely broad, and it's used very freely and very easily. And of course, in case you don't know, the recent amendments to the Printing Presses Publications Act is the most hilarious, because of course our government is extremely liberal. dirty word, they're progressive. Najib is such a progressive prime minister. What they did was, under his rule, they have amended the Printing Presses Publications Act, right? So in the past, where you have to renew if you're a newspaper, for example, you have to renew your printing license every single year. All right, now they say you don't have to renew it every single year. Once you have your license, it's okay. You don't have to renew it every single year. Wow, that's incredible, fantastic. I don't have to renew my license every single year. That makes me free? No, it doesn't actually, because they can revoke your license at any single time. Right? So somehow, by not having to renew it, suddenly you're freer. Oh, we are such a democratic state. But they can revoke it anytime, and they can ban things. And the grounds on which you can ban things is extremely broad. So of course, if you do not allow certain voices to be heard, if you do not allow certain information to be passed on, if you do not allow certain opinions to be passed on, then of course it eases persecution, because there is no space for an alternate view. And it's so easy to shut down the alternate view. And of course, the most incredible thing recently is the use of the Sedition Act. Right, the Sedition Act is a very old law. It's from, if I'm not mistaken, it's from the 1940s, and it was a law designed by the British in order to control the anti-British, anti-colonial movement of Malaya at the time. And of course, eventually the anti-colonial movement won in the form of the alliance. But instead of getting rid of the Sedition Act, they decided to embrace it as their own. So they've adapted it, they've loved it, they've maintained it. They were supposed to get rid of it, but it's still there, and they're using it. They're using it more and more recently. Sometimes in situations where it doesn't make sense at all. Yeah, and in it, something which is seditious is anything which promote feelings of ill will between races. Okay, between races and classes of Malaysian society. I was looking at it, and it's quite interesting. The Sedition Act doesn't mention religion. It doesn't actually mention, promoting feelings of ill will in between religious groups. It doesn't say that. It says races and classes of Malaysians. I suppose classes, you could interpret that to include religion as well. But races, that makes things a bit interesting, because, as we know, under the Constitution, a Malay is defined as a Muslim. So that relationship between the two, an ethnic grouping and a religion, makes things very muddy. So, if you promote feelings of ill will against Islam, for example, or if someone thinks that you're doing that, then it could be viewed as promoting ill will between races, because Malays are Muslims. We can't be anything else. All right, so that's a Sedition Act, and one thing about the Sedition Act is it's extremely broad as to what is sedition. But what is really shocking for me was the case against the late Karpal Singh. You see, because the Sedition Act actually says that if you criticize, if you raise feelings against the government, for example, could be sedition. However, if you're doing it in order, or the rulers, government or the rulers, which is the sultans, etc. However, if you're doing it for the purpose of pointing out that they're doing something incorrect, according to the Constitution, then it's not sedition. Right? It's not sedition. So, if you look at the Karpal Singh case, which has nothing to do with religion, but I'm just illustrating the dangers of the Sedition Act. If you look at the Karpal Singh case, why was he deemed being seditious? What was he saying which was so seditious? What he said was that the Sultan of Perak was wrong in his handling of the Perak crisis. Right? That he should not have dismissed it was constructive dismissal. He shouldn't have dismissed the Menteri Besar and replaced him with the new Menteri Besar. Okay, and he says that if it's to be questioned, then we can go to court. That's what he says, right? That's what he said. Now, what he was questioning was the constitutional powers of the Sultan, right? And he is of the opinion that the Sultan had done something wrong constitutionally. On top of that, he's saying that if you want to settle it, we could settle it in court, which can happen because we have a special court which is provided for in the constitution, a special court which was thankfully created by the Mahathir Mohamad regime. Thank you very much. All right? So, strictly speaking, if you look at exactly what he was saying, it falls under the exception in the Sedition Act, which is not seditious, because he was questioning a ruler based on the ruler's constitutional powers. He wasn't saying, hate the ruler is awful, get rid of him. No, he was questioning the ruler based on the issue of the constitution, which is supposedly allowed in the Sedition Act. And yet still, he was found to be seditious. And yet still, the Attorney General Chambers wanted to put him into jail. So if you do something which is allowed under the Sedition Act and still to be found seditious, imagine if you do something which is not allowed under the Sedition Act. This is how dangerous the Sedition Act is. They don't need the ISA, they've got the Sedition Act. That's why they got rid of it, because they know they have a backing. Right? It's like having Lionel Messi in your football team, but Ronaldo's on the substitute bench. It's okay if Lionel Messi is gone. The pretty boy can take over. I hate them both, incidentally. Those are not my teams. All right, and it's so you have that, and then you have the Sharia criminal offences laws. Well, and they're different, yeah, because each state has its own, and the federal territories have their own. But you can find the general themes going across them. So, for example, false doctrine. You know, if you're spreading false doctrine, false worship. And these are all offenses which can land you in jail. But who determines what is false doctrine? Who determines what is false worship? Right? And that is determined by the individual departments. All right? So it's, of course, if they feel that if they feel that your practice of Islam, for example, is somehow not to their liking, it's easy for them to declare it as deviant, because they have the laws with which to do so. All right? And of course, we have laws against proselytizing, which is allowed for in the Constitution. Now, all these laws, how does it jive with our actual Constitution? Because I'm looking specifically here at three particular provisions. Article 10, which is about freedom of expression, and Article 11, which is about freedom of religion, and Article 3, which is about the religion of the Federation. Now, Article 10 says that, you know, we all have freedom of expression, except when, for purposes of national security, etc., it can be curtailed. And this brings me back to the point I was raising earlier this morning, to the question as to the limitations on freedom, right? Yeah, sure, of course it can be curtailed, but how far can you curtail it, and on what grounds? Right? So for example, if you look at the Printing Presses and Publications Act, just because the minister says this is prejudicial to public order, it should be challenged as to whether is it truly prejudicial against public order. All right? That's the point. It has to be challenged. And it has to be challenged in court. Right? Now, Article 11 is interesting because it's about our freedom of religion. And this is Article 11 says everyone has a freedom of religion. Everyone, not non-Muslims. Everyone. So if a Muslim chooses a particular route that he or she wants to take, then that freedom is there. It's guaranteed under Article 11. All right? You shouldn't be able to stop them. You shouldn't be able to punish them. There are limitations in Article 11, which is proselytizing. Now, proselytizing proselytizing to Muslims is allowed under Article 11 of our Constitution. But let me make this clear. It is allowed. It's not compulsory. That means to say, if a state government chooses not to make a law against proselytizing, then there will be no law against proselytizing. It's not a guaranteed thing, yeah? The Article 11 says states may make laws against proselytizing. It doesn't say states must make laws against proselytizing. And that's often forgotten. What's also often forgotten is that proselytizing is controlled not just between non-Muslims to Muslims, but also between Muslims to Muslims. So in order for a Muslim to preach, etc., he must get permission first. He cannot just do it by himself, which is what happened to Dr. Asri, the ex-mufti of Perlis, when he got done in Selangor, because he was giving an Islamic talk without the requisite permission. And of course, as you can all know, he is extremely dangerous and deviant. Right? And that's a joke, yeah? In case. Now, and finally, Article 3, where Islam is the religion of the Federation, but all other religions can be peacefully practiced in the country. Now, I've spoken about this 1 million times already. I'm pretty bored about it. Does Article 3 mean that Malaysia is an Islamic state? My argument is no, it does not mean Malaysia is an Islamic state. That's not what it means at all. And this is quite clear in the preparatory works for the Constitution. When the Constitution was being made, the alliance, which is incidentally, in case you've forgotten, the alliance consists of MCA, MIC, and UMNO. All right, they said that Article 3 does not mean that the Constitution is not secular. Very clear, as far as I can see. All right, the purpose of the founders of the country did not want Article 3 to make Malaysia an Islamic state. All right. Anyway, but other religions can be practiced peacefully. Now, this brings me to the point of the Allah issue, the use of Allah in churches, the use of Allah, the word Allah in the Bible, and all the rest of it. And by the way, I have read the Ma'is pamphlet on this thing. All right, and on my personal view, having read it thoroughly, okay, their contention, when they raise the verses in the Quran, the verses do not say non-Muslims cannot use the word Allah. The contention, what the Quran raises is that the concept of Allah is different amongst people. That's what it says. It doesn't say, a favorite one is that I've always been, it's always raised against me, is what about Surah, I don't know, Qul Huwallahu Ahad, which one is that? Al-Ikhlas. Oh, thank you very much. I don't know how I passed my Ugama class. But anyway, so, Al-Ikhlas is always raised with me. But, but having read it so many times, it's not about using the term. It's about your concept of God, which is different. And that's acceptable. All right? By the way, the point is, if the Christians in this country want to use Allah in their prayers or whatever it is, Article 3 actually allows it, because Islam is the religion of the Federation. All others can peacefully practice theirs. And as long as they're not disturbing anyone, they're peacefully practicing their faith. Who are we to stop them? And why should we? And the judge in the Court of Appeal who said that, oh, by the way, this is not actually part of your faith, this is not it's not an integral part of your faith, therefore we can stop you from using it. Who are you to say whether it's an integral part of my faith or not? My faith is my faith. Who are you to sit there and tell me it's not an integral part of your faith? What? Since when? Since when did you have the right to tell me what's integral or not integral? And just like we don't like it done to us, okay, just like, you have bigots all over the world who attack Muslims, for example, the same applies to us here. We cannot do it to others. What is so difficult to understand? That if you don't like it done to you, you don't do it to others. What is so difficult to understand? What if you're in a Christian country which has gone mad, say like Texas, and they say that the Muslim version of who Jesus is so bad because Jesus is the Son of God, and they're saying he's just a human being. We must stop them from using Jesus in their, they mustn't refer to Jesus because they don't understand Jesus. Who are you to tell me what I understand about Jesus or not? Right? So it's so basic that it boggles my mind. So with regards to the persecution of others in this country, I think many of the situations, so if you're talking about the Shias, about the Ahmadiyas, it clearly goes against Article 11 because it's their freedom to worship how they want to worship. Absolutely is their freedom. And you have no right to stop their worship. Now, where do they get this power from? Because the power to stop comes from the Sharia offences laws, which are available all over the place. Some states are stricter than others. Okay? Now, the problem is this. You see, if you look at the Constitution, you have Schedule 9. Now, Schedule 9 lays down the powers of lawmaking. Okay? So, Parliament, which is the federal lawmaker, can make laws on these topics. And there's a list. And I'm not going down them, it's very boring. Okay? State governments can make laws on Islamic matters. And it gives you a list of the kind of Islamic matters which state government can make laws upon. And the list is actually quite specific. Yeah? Marriage, divorce, property, inheritance, wakaf land, all that kind of stuff. All right? That's not a problem. And I don't think anyone's really raised that as an issue. But then there's this one little line. There's one little, it's not even a line, it's 2 words. They can also make Sharia offences laws for matters which go against the precepts of Islam. Sorry, 3 words. Precepts of Islam. What does that mean? And this is how they justify, the laws against false doctrine, the laws against so-called deviancy, the laws against false worship, etc. Because these are things which go against the precepts of Islam. Okay? Now, my argument is, I don't want to get into an argument whether it is against the precepts of Islam or not. That's not my point. My point is that even if you have that provision in the Constitution, that you can make laws for matters which go against the precepts of Islam, those laws still cannot contradict the fundamental freedoms which the Constitution allows. Because otherwise, those fundamental liberties which the Constitution allows become meaningless. If you can make laws which go against that under the argument that it is against the precepts of Islam. What if it's deemed that it is against the precepts of Islam to disobey your leaders? And they make a law against us criticizing UMNO. And they say, oh, it is against the precept of Islam to because there are some Muslim thinkers who think that you cannot criticize your leaders. What if then what's the point of having a democratic system? Do you see what I'm saying? Even if it's allowed, whatever laws you make under that excuse, under that reason, still has to be within the boundaries which the Constitution laid down. And that's a legal argument which I don't think has really been explored. And for me, that's the way it should be. Because otherwise, the protections which the Constitution gives us becomes meaningless. So, based on all this, how do you move forward? Well, it's very difficult. The easy answer is that we need institutional change. But which institution? For me, the most important institution here is the judiciary. Personally, right? Because it is the judiciary which determines whether something is constitutional or not. It is the judiciary which determines, which controls the limits with which an authority can act, which controls the limits with which a legislative body can make laws. It is the judiciary which determines, this is unconstitutional, you cannot go this far. So there's a need to examine that, and this is what's worrying me about our judiciary right now, because although there are some excellent judges, and there have been some excellent judgments in the past few years, and I'm not criticizing every single judges, but there have been more and more situations where it's so obvious that something is against the Constitution, but the judge still decides in that manner, and one wonders why you're doing this when something is so clear. All right. Cases like, for example, cases where cases like freedom of religion, the Lena Joy case, for example. The federal court basically washed their hands of it. They said that, it's not for us to decide. This is actually a matter of procedure. She didn't follow the procedure. She didn't properly leave the religion, etc. So they did not actually deal with the fundamental question: is it her freedom? Is it her right to leave the religion if she wanted to leave the religion? They did not deal with the key question. In fact, instead they went around it and said, well, she should have followed a certain procedure to leave the religion. She didn't follow this procedure, so we're going to give it back to the federal Sharia court, which is ironic because the federal government, the federal laws on Sharia offences laws or Sharia laws do not have any provision for the leaving of the religion. Right? Compare and contrast to 1988, where the Supreme Court at the time was the highest court in the country, in the case of Jalaluddin Osman, held that Jalaluddin, who was actually born into a Muslim family but converted to Christianity and was then subsequently detained under the Internal Security Act because he was supposedly a threat to national security because he's a Christian. All right, the court actually held that this action on the part of the government was unconstitutional because his right to choose Christianity was his right under Article 11 of the Constitution. So in 1988, you see the court actually making a decision based on constitutional principles and not going around it or trying to avoid it, which is what's happening more and more today. All right? So it's very worrying that our courts do not seem to appreciate that when they make an oath, the judges, when they made an oath, it was an oath to uphold the Constitution. It was not an oath to uphold their own personal beliefs. That is not the point. Otherwise, don't be a judge. You can be a lecturer at IIU, all right? Okay, and you'll be happy, all right? But so yeah, maybe institution, but ultimately it's the lack of the democratic spaces, which is the greatest problem here, the lack of intellectual debate, of openings with which discourse can happen and with which people can get different perspective and different views, right? It's the one-way street of opinion, which is ultimately the problem here, and it's you know, there's no easy answer. You know, I get this so often. You know, sometimes I'm sitting having a quiet drink, and then I see someone who I know is part of civil society, and I get a bit worried that they're going to come and stop and chat with me, because the normal question is, hey, Azmi, hey, what are we going to do? Huh? You know, and this is very sad, resigned. What can we do? What are we going to do? And you know, and the question is, of course, you know, there is no easy answer. There's no one thing which we can do. It's a question of striving continuously. And what's important here is that this, you know, we need to have a view put forward that constitutional rights, protecting human rights is actually in the interest of everybody. It's in the interest of the orthodox, it's in the interest of the liberal, it's in the interest of the religious, it is in the interest of the non-religious, it is in the interest of everybody that these things are protected, and we do not allow any one body or any one government to oppress and suppress, because if they can suppress me now, they can suppress you tomorrow. That's the kind of message that we have to get out. Just because, the thing is, just because you've been in power for so long, you forgot what it feels like to be out of power. Remember what I said in the beginning. One of the principal fundamental reasons we have human rights is to be able to live without fear. You cannot live a full life if you are scared. And you'll always be scared when there can be so much persecution, both by the law and both by those who seem to be outside the law. Thank you very much.